Hello, today is November 13th, 2020. My name is Itzel Pena. I'm interviewing Camila Pena for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Pena, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain a copyright or non-exclusive right to the interview and any other materials you donate to the special collections and archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Okay, so the first question is, do you give the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any other materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We used information from the pre-interview to help in this research. The entire form was kept in a secure Voices server at the Collections and Archives. We would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. Do you wish to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archive?
Yes, I agree.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voices receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections. I look forward with what you will say in your interview questions I will now ask you. So first of all, Camila, thank you for your time. As I have said before, your story and your experiences are valuable at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces Project. Particularly for us at the UTRGV Special Collections, we are committed to preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Latinos from the South Texas and Rio Grande Valley, and those who work closely with these populations during this COVID-19 pandemic. Because you are a reporter who cares for providing the community with information and updates of what goes around the world, and because you are a daughter, a sister, and a friend who is knowledgeable of the ways COVID-19 has affected others in her inner circle, I know you have many meaningful stories and experiences to share with how COVID has impacted these roles as you carry in your life. So before I ask you to share stories about your life in this pandemic, tell us, who is Camila Pena?
Camila Pena is a young woman from Hispanic descent. She is someone that is willing to share the stories of the public, share the stories of those that are not able to express what they feel, and at the same time, share the stories of a lot of individuals who maybe don't feel comfortable in the community they're living in or have some kind of issues around our community. So pretty much Camila Pena is a young journalist who is eager to learn and share the stories of our community.
Awesome. So the first question I want to ask you is, when did you first hear about COVID-19? How did you learn about it? Was it on the radio, the TV, children, social media?
So, as a journalist, pretty much we are always paying attention to the exterior news. So, I got my information mostly from bigger news stations. As I work with Univision, I work with Fox at a local level, and so I first heard of COVID-19, back in 2019, the end of 2019, actually. And I remember hearing about it, knowing how, one individual, two individuals, and suddenly, a whole community in Wuhan, China was being affected by this unknown virus at the time. And, that's pretty much how I heard about it. I know that Univision National, as well as CNN, Fox Newscast, were showcasing a little bit of how this virus was transitioning. And yeah, that was pretty much how I found out about it.
What was your first reaction to the information about COVID-19?
My first reaction, as many individuals of the community, because I feel like people forget that we as journalists are human beings as well. And my first reaction was, what is this virus about? Who is it going to affect? Is it coming our way? The information was pretty preliminary at the time. We still didn't know what caused COVID-19. We still didn't know what it was, basically. We just heard that people were getting sick all of a sudden. And so we didn't know how uh, the interaction was between one another, members of the community. We didn't know if this was a virus that was airborne. We didn't know anything about it. So my first reaction was, how long will it take to reach us here in the valley?
Right. At this point, did you realize the pandemic was a serious life-altering event, or did you not think it was serious?
Honestly, I didn't think it was a life-threatening event at that time, just because we often hear about incidents happening in China, about certain viruses or certain sicknesses that are started over there in China. And so I didn't really think a lot about it at the time. But as the days continued, we started hearing about an increase in cases over there in China, and so that's when it started. That's when I kind of realized that it was eventually going to make its way over here to the U.S.
Over the last few months, what news media, social media, or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about coronavirus?
Pretty much, when I started hearing about this pandemic, and I started, kind of researching about it, CDC was one of the websites, and it still is, one of those information sites where I would get most of my information, most of my data. I would also take a look at AP sometimes. New York Times was really good as well. And so I would also listen to certain podcasts from like other journalists that were covering the event from Wuhan, China.
Can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease? Likewise, can you share with me what you don't understand about this new coronavirus?
Absolutely. So as a journalist, I kind of have to set up a relationship with different doctors in the area. And so I know that when we first started hearing about the first cases here in the US, I immediately contacted the doctors that I knew. And I believe it was one of those experiences where we were learning as time progressed, because most doctors, they knew nothing about it either. And so it was just, calling them every single day, learning about, what it was that they knew this, today, calling them the following day, what it was that they knew now. And so as of now, my understanding of COVID-19 is an airborne disease. It's a virus that is affecting our community, especially those that are at a higher risk. In this case, individuals who have who have sicknesses such as diabetes, who maybe have obesity. Um, and so, it's, to my understanding, it's individuals that already have other sicknesses, the ones that are usually most affected by this virus. Something that I don't understand, and I know that, a lot of doctors themselves don't understand, is how the healing process works. So basically, I often hear debates from different doctors. Some of them talk about one of the treatments, the best treatment there is to, kind of help these patients with COVID-19 and the recovery process. being plasma, and other doctors refer to this as, a treatment that doesn't work at all. And so, it's hearing these contradictory statements often. And another thing that I don't really understand, and I know that a lot of doctors don't either as well, is the fact that we don't know if individuals who have contracted COVID-19 in the past, um, are bound to not have it again. We know that there are some individuals that, get antibodies from having COVID-19 in the past. And so they recover, and in case COVID-19, affects them again, they're more likely to, not go through the severe process as many of the members of our community have. But till this day, we still don't know how long those antibodies stay inside a person's body. And so that is something that, doctors don't really know, if we develop some kind of immunity to it, if some individuals do all of us. And so that's one of the factors that I still till this day don't have a clear understanding.
I think we all have the same questions. Would you take the first COVID-19 vaccine available on the market? Why or why not?
I think that as a journalist, I can't be the first one to take that step just because I'm the one that has to inform, and but I mean it could go both ways. So I could be the one that, tests it and tells our audience, this is what's going on, these are some of the symptoms I have. The reason why I wouldn't is because I myself, have polycystic kidneys, which means I already, have one of these sicknesses, and I don't know how that is going to be affected if I do take this vaccine, which we still, have no clue about.
Do your family hold the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some members who take it more seriously or more lightly?
I think that belonging to a Hispanic community, especially, those parents that are always, I don't want to say ignorant, but that are more likely to, hear something in the news or see something through, whether it be WhatsApp or see something on Facebook, and they're more likely to believe it. I feel like a lot of fake news was out there in social media, and that's why I feel like my parents in this case are the ones that took it to a little bit more extreme. Obviously, I do know that COVID-19 is a disease that has affected our community, but I just feel like my parents were the ones that are taking these extreme measures. um, and I've seen that my brothers, for instance, they keep on going out, so they don't really pay attention to the seriousness as well. So I feel like in my household we have, two different opinions or two different views about COVID-19 and the severity of, this sickness here in our community.
Right. For this next set of questions, I'd like to talk about how you've seen COVID-19 affect your family members and equal importance, because you do live in an area where the hotspot for the pandemic hit. So my next question for you would be, after realizing what the RGV had become, which is the hotspot for the pandemic, what was your family's initial response?
Again, I think that, the response of my family was trying to keep me to stay at home. The initial response from their behalf was, uh you're out there in the community, you are risking yourself, you're risking us. And I feel like, they were true in a sense, but, as a journalist, I have to be out there and I have to explore, learn what COVID-19 is, learn who it has affected, going out and getting these interviews with doctors and stuff. And so, I feel like my parents mostly were the ones that were really, really worried about me.
Mhm. Did your family self quarantine, or in other words, how was the pandemic during the spring and summer months handled at your house?
So fortunately for me, I thank God because my parents and, my family, no one tested positive for COVID-19. However, we, because of the severity of this disease, I feel like we were taking extreme measures at the time. When I first started hearing when we first started hearing about COVID-19 and we really didn't have a sense as to what it is or how it's going to affect us, I feel like we were taking, these extreme measures as to wearing gloves whenever we were going to the store. We even, went as far as wearing face shields, obviously your face mask. And, it was kind of like you felt like if you were in a battle zone pretty much because you didn't even want to step outside your house because of how, insecure you felt about not knowing, how this virus transmits.
How has the pandemic affected the way your family celebrates holidays, birthdays, and other gatherings? Please feel free to share any relevant stories.
As of now, I feel like it has affected us in a way that obviously we're still not at that stage where we are comfortable going to places, let's say family gatherings or stuff like that. Um, but I've seen that, not, with other family members from like, uncles or cousins, they have invited us to like different events, for example, like birthdays and stuff, but it's always like, in the drive-through scenario. And so basically we just go through there, we just wave hi or, goodbye, and that's about it. I mean, that's pretty much it. So I feel like it has, in a sense affected the way we used to gather before, but not really because, well, here I live with my parents, I live with my brothers, so there's, always that contact between them and me.
Mhm. In your pre interview, you mentioned your significant other living in McAllen, which is about 20 minutes from where you reside. Was there any social awareness and precautions in both places?
Absolutely. I feel like I was the one in this case who was taking these extreme measures just because at that time, the pandemic also affected him and, his work in this case. So he was unemployed. So most of the time he was just staying at home, quarantine. It was me, the one that was out there in the community. And so we talked about it, we talked about how this was going to work. I didn't want to, create any type of inconvenience for him, for his father. And he told me that, it was fine that we could take some measures, but we could, still continue to see each other. And so that's pretty much the way we handle it. There wasn't really anything, other than that, because like I said, he was staying at home and he wasn't going out. So it was pretty much me, the one that was out there.
Right. You are considered an essential worker. How did having to go out every day, risking contracting the virus, affect your family?
So, like I said, it really did affect my family at a point where I guess more the mental stress of it or the emotional stress in this case, because they were always, so scared. And it's understandable. I mean, you're out there in the community, talking to a person who could potentially be a carrier of the virus. And I feel like my parents were seeing that, and it really did affect them at a mental, emotional level, knowing that they couldn't really protect me because it's not like one of those scenarios where, let's say, for example, you're having a problem at school, someone is bothering you, and your parents try to find a way to cope with it. Well, now you're talking about, something that you can't even see, you don't even know where it's at. And so I feel like that, the sense of them not being able to protect me was what really affected them.
Was there other essential workers in the household or was it only you?
Thankfully, my dad is an essential worker as he works for a produce company. My brother was also an essential worker at the time. He was working, for an agency where they would manufacture cars and fix them up. And so we were all taking our precautions, but yeah, we are all essential workers.
Did the pandemic affect your social outings as a couple? You and your significant other?
Got it. Yes, it did for sure. At the beginning of the pandemic, when I first started hearing about the cases spiking in other parts of the US, I knew this was going to hit eventually. I knew this was headed its way, to the valley. And I told him, you know what, we're just going to limit ourselves to not going out. Absolutely. I feel like we are so blessed with the fact that we can still interact. And so, we could do that at home. We could just, sit down, watch a movie, and let that be it. Because, you know, thinking back then, first thing that came to mind was the virus, and not knowing, who had it, what the virus was, or anything. I felt like that was the best decision to make, at that time, which was just stay at home regardless.
This next set of questions focuses on your stories and experiences as a reporter in the time of COVID-19. So this next question states, can you please tell me where you work and describe a part of your job?
Absolutely. So I work with Univision and Fox at a local station here. So we cover the Valley all the way to Laredo. And I'm a multimedia journalist. So what that means is I'm a reporter, but I actually work as a cameraman. So I pretty much do everything. I record, I do the interviews, I do the research, I make the calls, and I also get to edit everything that I do.
Mhm. How did you end up in Intravision?
It was a funny story, actually. I had just graduated from college, and my only experience at the time was writing for the university's newspaper. And when I came back home, it kind of hit me, not being um, out there as I used to, because obviously when you're in college, you're always staying busy. And I was always used to staying busy, especially because I had just graduated high school with my associates in this case. So I was always busy and then headed over to college. So whenever I came back, it kind of hit me. Um, Especially when people started asking, like, what are you doing? And you not being able to say, like, well, I'm not doing anything. Obviously, it kind of felt bad. So I was like, you know what, let me just give it a try, apply different places, and see what it's about. And so I applied there in Introvision. I was called in for an interview. I did the interview. It was actually a 2-day interview. And so afterwards, I just sat down, I spoke to my now, boss, and he started asking me questions in both English and Spanish. And I guess he kind of saw that I was fluent in both languages, and that's why he decided to hire me.
How was your job affected once the pandemic came to the RGV?
My job, I believe, is was one of the ones that was very affected in different ways. From the stories that we covered, we would usually always cover things like, crimes, regular crimes, homicides, robberies in the area, court cases. And so now we shift from covering all these stories, which are usually referred to as top stories, or covering breaking news, um, to just going COVID, COVID, COVID every single day. And so, yeah, it was a big change. It still is. When we're speaking about, my presence there, it was shifting, not knowing where I was going to be at the time. Um, when we first heard, about COVID-19 making its way eventually to the valley, I remember my boss sitting down and telling us, this virus is headed towards us. It's time for us not to panic, but I want you guys, to go home today and just pack a bag, put in, an extra set of clothes there, and keep it here in our office, because what's going to happen is eventually it's going to get here. It's going to hit us really bad, and we're just going to have to pretty much live here in the office. And so, yeah, I mean, we were pretty much prepared for everything. It shifted entirely everything that I was used to doing.
Yeah. How did you feel knowing that you were going to be the one giving the community new information and updates about COVID-19?
So I was actually excited and I was scared at the same time, because I knew that this was a critical stage in my career as a whole, because I knew that now, those individuals that maybe never even turned on the TV were going to be stuck at home, or looking at our Facebook page trying to get, the latest information on COVID-19. And so I knew this was going to be a big opportunity for me, to show the community was what I was able to do and how I was able to inform them. But at the same time, I knew it was going to be a big challenge, because I was going to be out there risking my life pretty much, and risking my health.
What other roles besides conducting reports do you hold since you work for both Univision and Fox?
So like I said, I am actually a reporter and I get to do both newscasts, but it requires a whole lot more because we're multimedia journalists. So not only are we reporters, but we're actually like the cameramen.
Mhm.
We're actually the people that do the interviews. We're the ones that edit. So, there was a stage where it was kind of critical and we had to do up to like four different segments of the newscast. So I also had to learn how to like write and type everything and, just pretty much help out with whatever I could.
How have these roles been affected by the pandemic?
So pretty much every role I could say has been affected from the way we conduct interviews now, which I feel is a little bit more efficient because now we get to do, Zoom interviews, phone call interviews, something that you would rarely see back then. Um, at the same time, whenever we would do like an in-person interview, it would always have to be, staying obviously 6 feet away from the person. So it was always trying to hold, a metal rod with a microphone at the end and pointing it to the person, keeping our distance. So it affected that. It affected the way we, obtain information pretty much because now I was used to calling, the policemen in the morning, being like, hey, how many arrests did you guys make today? Or, what's going on in the community? Now we knew exactly that every single time we clock in, it's just going to be COVID related. And so it was, making these phone calls to doctors. Hey, what's the latest, what are the latest numbers for the ICU unit? Or, what is the most updated information as to the treatments that you guys are offering at the hospital? And keep in mind, there's several hospitals here in the Valley. So it was, doing the same thing for, the different hospitals. And so recording wise, it was risking yourself when you were out there recording, especially when they asked you to take video of like the hospitals or maybe um, asking people from the community like what do you think. You're out there risking what you're doing and your health pretty much.
Mhm. Being in charge of providing information, did you feel pressured into gathering as much information as possible?
Absolutely, I feel like at this stage it was the most critical because I'm not saying that you mess up frequently, but I feel like whenever you're talking about COVID-19, there is literally no margin for error. So you have to give out the most accurate, latest information, especially when you're having you know 600 people plus testing positive every single day in one county. It kind of gives that pressure as to update the numbers, keep updating the numbers, keep calling the doctors, tell them to give you the latest information for the ICU units, or tell them to give you the latest information of the recoveries that we have at the time. And so I feel like it's really a pressure because it's not the same thing as to like when people turn on the TV and they just kind of want to know what's going on in the community. So they're like, oh, you know what? We had a robbery here, or they want to share that with their neighbor, like, hey, did they wake up in the morning and they're over there talking to their neighbor and hey, did you hear about this? Oh no, I had no clue. No, now they're their safety or their yeah, I mean, all their information just depends on you. And it's like they have to know what's going on. It's not a do you want to know? It's a you have to know so you can protect yourself, so you can, hear what the doctors are saying. Is there a cure? Is there, no cure? What do we know? How can you protect yourself? And so I feel like that creates a lot of pressure because you know that whatever message you convey in a newscast, especially, people are listening and people are gonna look at you as the person that they have to listen to.
Right. How often were you receiving updates on COVID-19?
So like I said, I was receiving updates every hour, let's say. um it was quite surprising because we knew there was a point in time where we knew exactly what hour each county would be posting their latest numbers. And so sometimes, whenever the county had posted the numbers, or the death toll, it was always like calling them and kind of pressuring them into giving us that information because we had to get it out to reviewers. And so, yeah, it was very, very constant, especially at that time, back in June, I'm sorry, July, August, when we were having like the largest number of deaths here in the valley. It was always, trying to get that information and updating the numbers because people have to know what's going on.
Mhm. Was there ever times where you felt worried about receiving the wrong information and then having to distribute it to the public, considering how fast everything was being updated?
Absolutely. I feel that as journalists, that is the main struggle right now with COVID-19, because as I had told you, previously, sometimes we have different versions. So a doctor may look at a research and stand by that research, and then we have another doctor saying no, that is completely false. And so there you find yourself in the middle of a situation where you don't know, what would be the most accurate information at the time. um, for instance, right now we have heard, about ventilation, and how ventilation inside closed spaces is very important. And so before that, we didn't even have a clue about that. And so hearing just one doctor talking about ventilation, it kind of makes you think, like, is this something that I should share with my viewers, or is this something that I should just keep to myself until I have, more research on it, or more people that support this idea? But what happens if I wait? If I wait for too long, that maybe this is something that could potentially cure a life of someone else.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that as a journalist, you always have, that struggle as to having to decide what you share with the viewers and what you don't.
Can you share with me how it felt having to report deaths? Was it something that took an emotional toll?
Yes, I feel like people think that, because we're journalists and because they see, this serious face in front of the TV, we have no feelings. And so just looking at the number of deaths every single day, and just looking, at the numbers increasing, it kind of makes you think back to your parents, or it makes you think back to your grandparents, especially when you haven't seen them in a while because of the pandemic. And so seeing that most of these individuals had pre-existing medical conditions, and knowing that you have someone at home that also has pre-existing medical conditions, it also has diabetes, it also has obesity, high blood pressure, it you kind of have to like differentiate between trying to keep your personal life away from it. But it hurts, like it hurts sharing and hearing about the deaths, because it's your community and that's where you grew up. And especially when you're giving out the numbers, which happened to me, a few times, looking at the number of deaths for one day, and then realizing, your friend's mom was the one that passed away, so she's one of those numbers. It's a strong feeling, yeah.
Was there ever a time where you wished most of your reports were not focused on the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. When we started going back to doing, robberies and, just regular vehicle pedestrian accidents, it sounds cruel, but it was a relief, because I feel like your your mental stress, your, emotional levels just kind of breathe for a second, because you don't have to be covering COVID. It's just so consuming, to cover COVID-19 every single day, and waking up the next morning and doing it all over again. And so I feel like, getting this type of normality, in a sense, it has been very helpful, not only for me, but I know for a fact that for many journalists as well.
In the following set of questions, we will primarily focus on work-related challenges. So the first question for you would be, how has the workplace been affected due to the pandemic?
So during this pandemic, definitely has been affected because people need to have the news regardless.
Mhm.
And so that kind of leaves no space for you to get sick. Um, if someone gets sick or contracts the virus, it's like, go quarantine, disinfect, and put someone else in there because people, they have to have their news regardless. And so we made a lot of changes. I know, for instance, we had to shift from, being there at the station, which, mind you, I have been working for Introvision for 2 years now, and every single day I reported to the station. So I went to the station, I was there for my 8-hour shift, and I went back home. Now it's like, they gave us the keys, they gave us our cameras, our equipment, and they said, goodbye, you guys are on your own. You guys are going to have to learn how to manage your time and send everything in so we can have it at the newscast. And I feel that change was, it's very understanding because if someone, let's say, if one of us contracts the virus, we are going to be here isolated at home. So that means we're not going to come in contact with other people who could fill in case we do get sick. And so, yeah, there was definitely a lot of changes, and there's still a lot of changes there.
You mentioned in your pre-interview that you work from home. Do you know when you will be able to return to your regular workplace?
Not yet. We still have no clue. We were working remotely for roughly 2 months. I believe it was back in June, and yeah, back in June and July, when COVID first started hitting here. Uh, we were sent home and we were working there for 2 months. That's when we kind of started seeing, the number of cases decrease a little bit. So they told us to come back, and then suddenly, in those, these last months, when it went, just drastic, when we just started seeing a dramatic increase, that's when they said, you know what, it's not safe. You guys have to go back. And at first, when they had first sent us back, it was kind of like an organized thing. So they told us, 2 weeks before, guys, we're potentially going to be sending you guys home. We want you to organize your stuff. We want you to take extra set of batteries, do this, do that. When we started, when we were back in the studio and we started seeing the drastic increase in cases, it was just from one day to the other. No, you guys are going to go back. So take everything right now and leave. I need you to leave right now. And so oof, yeah, that really hit.
Is there certain people who have continued to go to the building to utilize the studio or equipment? If so, about how many people?
Yes, I believe currently we have, I would say, 9 individuals working there. Just because, that's the limit, that's the exact number of people that we need to work on the newscast. So, from people doing the cameras to the anchors to the producers, the ones that are basically running the shows are the ones that are there. And like I said, we do work for 3 markets. So we do McAllen, we do Corpus, and we do Laredo, and then we do Fox as well. And so it's just very limited, the people that are there. I would say probably like around 8 or 9 individuals.
How do you feel about working from home? Is it challenging or is it something that you prefer?
When I first started working from home, it was very hard. It was very hard for me because, like I said, we were used to doing interviews in person and now doing everything through Zoom, doing everything through phone. And I feel like this was a learning experience for everyone, even the people we were interviewing, because, now I feel like they are more technology friendly because they've had to, do it for these couple of months. But when it first started, it was like, I cannot connect. I don't know what to do. I need you to guide me. And, also getting all the information. And now, before we would get to the studio, we would edit there and send it directly to the computers that they use. So you could potentially get back to the workplace at around 3 p.m., let's say. And then you could start editing and you can start sending your material. Now you had to do everything. Ooh, we're talking about 2 or 3 hours before. So by 3 o'clock, if your newscast is at 5, you have to have everything in. And that's kind of like a time crunch if you think about it. Like that's even adding more stress because sometimes people aren't available at the times that you need the information. And so it's definitely been a challenge.
And we do go back to how quickly things were updating. So I can only imagine. Does knowing that one day you will have to return to your regular workplace keep you up at night, or is it something that you're comfortable with?
I feel like at this point I'm comfortable going back just because I've had, many experiences where I feel like I was at that point where I didn't know if I had COVID-19 or if I didn't. Because I would interview someone, or I would be at a press conference, and then that same night, a person that was there, a person that I said hi to, tested positive for COVID-19. And so I was kind of like shocked to hear about it, and I was like, no, it was a scary situation. But I feel like now at this point, I could be comfortable going back, working there, knowing that they're paying close attention to disinfecting everything. And also, I mean, we still have to keep our distance and wear a face mask. Um, to answer the last question, because I know I didn't, I feel like at this stage I am ready to take on, any challenge going back to the studio. But I definitely do prefer, I think I'm being more useful now than I was when I had to do like in-person interviews, only because now I have a little bit more time since I'm working from home. And I think I like it a lot. I mean, having, instead of having one interview scheduled and then driving 30 minutes to get to the other one, I can now have, an interview at 12, interview at 12:15, interview at 12:30. And so that, I'm kind of managing it. So I like it a lot.
Can you tell me if your finances or the news agency's finances have been impacted by the ongoing pandemic?
Yes, actually, I know that um, the company had to let some people go because of the, financial needs that we have. And I believe we had to they reduced a little bit of our salary just because we were having a hard time, keeping up with the payments and everything. So yeah, I know the company for sure, it was impacted. And like I said, they had to let a lot of people go. But me personally, thankfully I haven't had a struggle because of it.
Good. We will now move on to the final questions of this interview, which relate to the responses of COVID-19. So the first question is, are you satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in Hidalgo and Hidalgo County?
Yes, I am satisfied because I feel like our authorities did the most that they could, especially, like our county authorities, to get the message out to the public. I feel like for me personally, they were very transparent with their numbers, very transparent with their information. They were, constantly letting people know, even though it sounded repetitive, wear your face mask, keep your distance, don't go out, don't join gatherings. And so I feel like they did a good job.
Are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by Governor Abbott?
Honestly, I would say at a personal level that I wasn't satisfied at all by the way that he handled things, just because I feel like not for instance, not making the face mask mandatory at the beginning of the pandemic. I feel like that was a big mistake. A lot of people, uh, even though the county authorities or the county judges were telling the public, guys, wear your face mask, and we're even, sending out orders so people could obey. Many people just disregarded it because, oh, here we have the governor that is saying, that we don't, it's not mandatory. Or, even when local authorities were telling them not to go out, not to go, hang out, etc. I feel like most of them were like, well, you know what, the governor just allowed for the reopening of businesses, so we're just going to listen to him because he's above your authority. And so I feel like he didn't do a very good job, just because I guess he kind of got a little bit, confident that the pandemic was just, like any other flu. But in reality, the changes that he made, or allowing businesses to reopen, and pretty much going on with his plan, I feel like that affected us so much, and people didn't even realize how much it affected us.
Are you satisfied with the national response to COVID-19 led by President Trump and his administration?
I am not. Going back to the same topic, I feel like even when we had, the highest number of cases here in the valley, he still pretended like it was, just a regular flu. And those that actually live here and got to see it, we noticed, that people are dying. How could you say this is, just a regular sickness when we're seeing the numbers of people passing away? And so I feel he kind of made it seem like it was, just nonsense, and that people shouldn't really take into consideration the guidelines from like CDC or the World Health Organization as well. And yeah, I would say I'm not I up until this day I'm not satisfied with the way he handled this pandemic.
If you had the power to respond to COVID-19, what would you do differently, if there's anything?
You see, I think, and I kind of understand the struggle many of our leaders or local leaders or state leaders, federal leaders, if you will. I understand the struggle that they go, because it's like having them decide between, you know, allowing people to go back to work and feed their families, or allowing people to, stay at home and protect themselves from the virus. So it's like putting everything in a balance, and just kind of, having to decide like what's best for the people. So I do commend them for that. I feel that something for sure that I would do differently would be making mandatory, regardless, making mandatory the use of a face mask, and limiting, the number of people inside a restaurant, let's say, or a business. Just because I feel like sometimes people get too confident and they just walk in there and they're still congregating, they're not keeping their distance. So I feel like for sure those are the two things that you know, I would put out there. Like, people have to wear face mask, people have to, you know, uh, not gather. And yeah, I feel like if that would have been implemented from the beginning, we probably wouldn't be, at this stage, or we wouldn't have been as affected.
Right. This is a special year in our national democracy because it's a presidential voting year. Did you vote? And if so, did you notice or do anything different because of COVID-19?
Yes, this year I did vote. It was my first year voting in a presidential election, and I had voted previously, but never in a presidential race. And so something that I noticed from back then to this year, obviously, was that people, were taking a lot of precaution. So you went in there, you had to disinfect your hands. So it was a little bit different, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, well, looking at the journalistic side, it was a lot different, because we know that a lot of people, we had this conflict regarding the vote by mail. um, and we're still trying to deal with that. And so it was different, it was very different in that sense. But for me personally, going out and voting, it was no different than in other years. Obviously, just the use of a face mask and keeping social distance.
To conclude our interview, I would like to ask if there is anything else you would like to share with me about your experiences with COVID-19 that I have not asked about.
I feel for the most part we covered everything. um I just wanted to say that, me, for my personal experience, it was, I went through the whole transition
Mhm.
from, first hearing about COVID-19, not thinking anything about it at the time, later hearing about, I'm talking about like the first case that I heard, the first COVID-19 case. And then, kind of, it was interesting, and that was about it. And then seeing that a lot of people were getting infected there, and then seeing how it was literally transitioning to the US. And when it, the first cases were heard of here in the US, that's when it really hit home. And that's when I feel like a lot of journalists, we realize like this is going to hit us and this is going to hit us hard. And so, yeah, I would just like to add that, you know, um, pretty much that, that a lot of people don't think, they think we're just out there to inform, that we don't have, a life, or that we don't feel, or, but no, in all reality, I feel like we as journalists, we have a lot to tell, obviously, but we also feel and we also have emotions, and we are seeing firsthand what is happening to our community. And so, despite this being one of the most affected areas, one of the hot spots for COVID-19 a couple months ago, I feel like we're still not at that stage to just let go. Today, I was actually working on a report, and I kind of wanted to share this because I feel it's important. I feel like a lot of us at this stage think like, "Oh, yes, we made it." But I was working on a report earlier today in regards to COVID-19 cases and how we are seeing a 30% increase in local hospitals. How right now, Hidalgo County is registering an increase in cases. So is Cameron County, so is Stark County. And, even I even have the opportunity to speak with authorities from the Mexican side, and they were mentioning the exact same thing, that they're starting to see an increase, a significant increase in COVID-19 cases. Cameron County was the one that was, seeing an increase in hospitalizations as well. And I feel like a lot of people are just, letting their guard down. And I feel like we're not at that stage anymore. We're not at that stage yet. Um, and I just wanted to put that out there because I feel like that's an important thing to state, that we as a community who has a lot of pre-existing medical conditions, who has high levels of diabetes in our community, of obesity, of high blood pressure, um, we shouldn't. We're seeing what's happening in El Paso. We shouldn't let our guard down, because there could potentially be a second spike in cases, and we don't want to, go through it all over again. And so that's the message that I was trying to convey. Just be careful out there and continue taking care of ourselves. That's the main priority.
Well, Camila, well, I just want to say thank you for sharing your experience with us today. And you did awesome in this interview. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Goodbye.